Today on Tri-Curl Studios, we do a video that I don't really like doing, but it's been requested quite a bit, probably to help with shootout requests, and we go over my amp head collection for May 2022. Now, as I said at the beginning, I'm not a big fan of doing these type of videos. There's a few reasons why. I will go over that, but I can understand why people have been requesting this. And when I say, quite a few people, it's like 40 or 50 people. That's not really a whole lot. But I can understand why people have been requesting it. Usually when I do things like high gain amp shootouts, or the no metal, no pedal shootouts, or the no metal, no pedal videos, or the metal videos, I usually get a whole bunch of questions like, what other amps do you have? Or, what's in your collection kind of a deal. So they can kind of see maybe different amps that I can shoot out. So I can understand why I've been asked to do this video. But here's the reasons why I don't like it. Number one, it takes a while to shoot the video. Number two, I tend to ramble. So I hate talking in videos. Number three, these amps is heavy. Number four, I have to edit the video, and if it's long to shoot, it's long to edit, and I have to listen to myself talk. And number five, and the most important one, it comes across as bragging, or being braggadocious, I guess you would say. I've been playing for about 28 years. I have a really good job, and an even better wife. So it's taken me 28 years to kind of amass the collection that I have. And yes, I do play every single one of the guitars that I own. And yes, I do play all of the amps that I own. Some a lot more than others. Some I just kind of keep as hidden gems to help boost inspiration from time to time. But yeah, I'm definitely not bragging. And there's definitely people out there who have way more amp heads than I have. So I have 33 tube amp heads, and I also have 2 amp heads in my possession that are not mine. They're Kevin's from this channel. They're eventually going back to him, but every time I say I'm gonna ship it out very soon, he's like, oh, what about this amp? What about this amp? And I do a shootout or something with them. I will make sure to let you know which ones those are. Alright, so first up we have the Blackstar HT Stage 100 Mark II. This is an amp that I do find is great for recording. It's very, very versatile. It's got an alright reverb to it. However, in like a live setting or in like maybe a rehearsal setting, it does come across like it's lacking balls, so lacking a lot of low ends, and when you're actually cranking it, certain frequencies don't react as they should, I guess you would say. But overall, in a studio environment, it's a great amp to have. Number 2 is the Carvin Legacy 2, the Steve Vai signature head. This is an amp that has a very odd mid-hump to it. It has a different style of internal boost, so it actually has a boost channel which can kind of be paired with channel 3, and it's a somewhat confusing, what people call a confusing boutique style amp. It's kind of sometimes hard to get tones out of it that you would want that maybe it might not have been designed for, which I guess is okay. But it's one of those amps that I do keep kind of hidden away to bring in, usually for like lead parts or such. Yeah, it's a pretty good amp that I think really would have benefited from a little bit of reverb and perhaps taking that mid-hump out. Number 3, we have the Crate Blue Voodoo BV120H. This is, I believe, the second iteration of it. It has the blue Tolex on it. It's not the one that has the very odd Blue Voodoo logo on it, which is, I believe, where the very clever, I know you're the only one who knows this one, Blue Doo-Doo actually came from. This is a very underrated amp. It's underrated, but doesn't overperform. It should have a better reputation than what it has. Yes, it can do metal, especially if you're pushing it with a boost in front, so to boost your guitar signal. And it can do so many other tones, and the reverb that's in it is fantastic. Number 4, we have the ENGL Invader 150. This is the Mark I version. This is one of the heaviest amps that I own, both in weight and in audible girth. It has... The mids on it are a little different, so it can be a little more pronounced in the mids, which is not a bad thing at all. And just the amount of gain that this thing has is fantastic. Number 5, we have a Fender Bassman from 1969. This is an amp that to me was very important to get because I have, well, at that point I had 2 Japanese Gretches. Now I have 3 Japanese Gretches. This is a very important amp to me for the simple fact that it gets a lot of tones that some of the more modern amps have troubles getting. Perhaps because they're not designed to do that, but just some of the frequencies on here, even though like you're looking at a treble and bass and a bright switch and a deep switch, that's it. There's no mid control here. Also, there's jumping channels, but it's just phenomenal. The characteristics of the frequencies that you can get from this amp, and it doesn't matter what guitar you throw in front of it, whether it's a Strat, Tele, Jazzmaster, Flying V, a Gretsch, Les Paul, SG, they all sound great. Number 6, we have almost, it's up there, almost my favorite amp of all time, the Fender SuperSonic. This is a 22 watt version. This is somewhat based on a Bassman and a Vibrolux, I believe. Or that could just be the clean channel, but it's just phenomenal. And the amount of comments that I've gotten in the past with playing through this amp and the different tones that you can get, especially for a Fender amp, a lot of the gain sounds that you can get, you know, not necessarily metal, but like a lot of the like really good throaty gains, like in like a rock or even a blues setting, it's just surprising to a lot of people, and I'm really, really happy that I own it. Number 7, we have the Friedman Runt 50, which is an amp that I somewhat ordered on a whim, just because I saw that it was in stock in a store, and I really wanted to grab a Friedman amp. I had passed up a few times on Friedman BE 100 Deluxe, and I really regretted that. I thought, you know what, they'll keep popping up, and they didn't. So I ordered this one. I find that it does a whole range of sounds. Classic rock, I think it really benefits from, or gets a lot of benefit from it. And if you're boosting or if you're raising the volume to appropriate levels without a boost, you can get a hard rock and definitely a newer metal type tone. And again, very, very happy that I own it. Number 8, we have the Hughes and Kettner Triamp Mark II. This is a 6 amps in one box type of a deal. The sheer amount of tubes in here adds so much weight. It's an awesome amp to own. I really find that the amp 1 on amp B, I guess you would call it, that is one of my most favorite tones that you can get. And of course, amp 3 on either amp A or amp B sound awesome as well. One thing that I really regret, which you'll probably hear a few times here, is that there's no built-in reverb. I'm a very, very big fan of spring reverbs, and I find that's one of the things that's lacking on this amp that would make it just one of the amps that I always grab for. Number 9, we have the Laney Ironheart 120. This is one of those amp heads that I wanted to buy just to buy it, if that makes any sense. Because I knew it had a little bit of a different tone to, say, a Marshall. And it was one of those ones where I don't know how, but I kept hearing that, it sounds just like a Mesa. I don't really think that after owning it. But it's a very surprising amp because I think there's just some sort of illusion that it either can or can't get any gain to it. And a lot of people don't understand how the dynamics and the tone work on here. Your dynamics is just a resonance control, and your tone is a presence control. I don't understand how people don't get that. But it also has a phenomenal reverb built into it. And it has a whole bunch of push-pulls to give you different shifts in your tones. And it does have an internal boost, which is alright. But you can get a very, very awesome metal tone out of it, and everything underneath, or everything in between that. It's one of those amps where I would put it up against quite a bit of the Marshalls. Speaking of Marshalls, number 10, we have the Marshall DSL 100 HR. I bought this amp because I was curious, basically. I have a JCM 800 DSL 50. I also have a TSL 100. And I knew that this was a Vietnamese-made kind of update to that amp. And I really, really enjoy the DSL 50. And I thought, you know what? I've heard a lot of crap about the DSL 100 HR, as in, like, you buy one and 6 months later they're dead. So I've owned this for over a year. I don't use it as my main amp, and I bought this used, so I was lucky with this one, I guess you would say. As far as tones, you can get a lot out of this. Boosted, unboosted, you can get a great metal tone, and everything leading up to it. The reverb on here is a digital reverb, which you also find in the JVM 410H, which I find it sucks until you're like sitting somewhere around like 3 or 4 o'clock, which on a reverb you wouldn't always do. At that point, the reverb kind of livens up. At number 11, we have the Marshall JCM 2000 DSL 50. This amp is awesome. The spring reverb that's built in is one of my most favorite spring reverbs that's built into any amp. A lot of people said, you know, when I had when I bought the Japanese Gretches, you have to get a Bassman. You have to get a Bassman. No amp will pair with a Japanese Gretsch more than a Bassman. Got the Bassman. Very good. Extraordinary. It does pair with it extremely well. However, put a JCM 2000 DSL 50 with a Japanese Gretsch, and that is a match made in heaven. At number 12, we have the Marshall JCM 2000 TSL 100. So this is just like the DSL. However, instead of having 4 channels, it has 3 channels, and they all have their individual controls instead of shared EQ. It also has that awesome reverb built into it. And I think for a lot of different tones, I would go with the TSL 100 over the DSL 50 that I own. I'm probably going to get a DSL 100 as well, and I'll probably still track down a DSL 100H. But the TSL is definitely not deserving of the... It has a very weird reputation to it. DSL 50 as well, some of the earlier ones, I guess there were issues with some of the boards. I believe that was the same with some of the early TSL 100s. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here. Maybe it was the whole series, but I thought it was kind of resolved at a certain point. But the TSL, I don't know why. It has a very weird reputation with it. Number 13, we have the Marshall JCM 2550, model 2555X. The X is for reissue. This is the Silver Jubilee, as they would say, with the mouth like that. And that's how a lot of people watch them all the time. Anyway, this amp right here, it's some nice push-pull going on here on the input gain. It's a somewhat 2-channel amp, that's for sure, with some different features to it. It does have some of the diodes, the dreaded diodes, but it is a very versatile amp, even at kind of 1.5 channels. And it's one that I find has a slightly odd, like if you're doing high gain, it has a slightly odd mid-hump to it. And it's also an amp that just, if you pair it with a Strat, it's a match made in heaven. This also, like it took a while for it to come in. I ordered it. And when I got it in, I played it, and I loved it so much. This doesn't make any sense, what I'm going to say here, but I loved it so much that I basically sat here and I was like, now I got to order a JCM 800. Speaking of the JCM 800, number 14 is a Marshall JCM 800 2203X. Again, the X is for reissue. This is a 2016 model. This amp has a very confusing reputation, and it deserves all the accolades that it gets, but a lot of people have never played a JCM 800, and they act as if they do because they don't understand how it works. I've always been told my whole guitar playing life, JCM 800, it's the greatest metal amp of all time. It has so much gain built in. I've been told by numerous people out there, doesn't need a boost, and you can get death metal tones with it. It needs a boost. It benefits highly from having a boost. It is a very loud amp, so if you don't have a sound-treated room and you're not playing live anywhere, maybe look at the 20-watt version. This amp here definitely, once your walls are shaking, just proves that it deserves its reputation as one of the very best amps on the market. Number 15, we have the very polarizing JCM 900. Now this is the 4100 model. It's the dual reverb model, so the one that gets the most amount of hate. And I challenge you to go and watch the shootout between the 800 and the 900 that I did, or the 900 metal video, or the 900 no metal, no pedal video. This is an awesome amp that, because it has diodes, it has like 30-something diodes in it, and some people got that information. That's kind of been the reputation of the JCM 900 for the most part. I know there's going to be SLX and the version 3 or Model 3 version. People that chime in here. But this is my secret weapon. It's a very dark sounding amp. So there's definitely, it's got some good deep tones to it. And it's definitely one of those amps that surprise people. And it's usually because of the reputation. And to be honest, I think a lot of people who don't like this amp or kind of trash this amp, they're the ones that are playing in their bedroom with the volume like all the way down. Just my opinion. Raise the volume. You will love this amp. Number 16 is the Marshall JVM 410H in all its high gain glory, in all of its just versatility and crazy amount of channels and different sounds you can get. And squeals. Yeah, you need a noise gate with this amp. The only downfall I find from this amp is that it has a digital reverb, but a lot of people hate this amp who can't afford it. And I don't really like saying that, but it can do what the DSL 100 HR does. You can match it point for point with the different channel options, and it can do way more. But time and time again, people will say, oh, the DSL 100 HR is a better amp. It's cheaper, I get it, but this, just sheer amount of options and the different tones that you can get DSL 100 HR no problem, and way above. Again, I just find that I wish it had, I understand why it has the digital reverb to it, but a spring reverb would have just made this amp the best amp. Number 17, we have the last Marshall that I currently own, which is the Marshall Origin 50. This is what I usually call like a mood amp. What I mean by that is it's hard to do some sort of channel switching. But when I'm playing this, I could play this all day long with any guitar that I have in my collection. And the reason that I can play it all day long and it can feel kind of, how would you say, rejuvenating each time, is that I can move the controls around and get very different tones, very responsive tones as well. And just the price point on it, yes, it's a Vietnamese-made amp, but you can just sit there all day and you can get all the different tones, almost all the different tones that you can get. Again, built-in reverb, spring reverb would have just made this an absolutely killer amp. And I do nothing but recommend this amp to people. However, if you are looking, if you're looking to play live with different tones and you're not basically using this on, I don't like doing it this way, but if you're not doing it this way, basically using the clean channel and pedals for all of your different sounds, then it's hard to recommend this amp, because it's not as versatile on a live stage where you may have to change settings on the fly. Because a lot of the tones that you're getting out of it is from the different low, mid, and high output volumes, where I think it's 5, either 10 or 25 and 50 watts that you can switch from. That's kind of where you can get your gain settings or your gain tones from. So it's hard to do in a live setting, but you know what? It's cheap enough, whereas you can buy 2 or 3 of them and use those and kind of get an ABY kind of setup there. Number 18, we have the Mesa Boogie 3-channel 100 watt dual rectifier. Again, this is not, as I said in many videos where people always ask the same thing even though I say it. This is not the multi-watt. This is, I believe, the year before the multi-watt. Kevin on this channel does have the multi-watts if you're interested in hearing it. But this is the 3-channel version where you don't really get to change, bring the wattage down to 50 watts, so you play it in your bedroom. This was my main amp for many years. I believe until I got, at that point, was the Mesa Boogie Mark V, I think, kind of switched over to being my main amp, and then from there on I didn't really have a main amp. But you can get the very famous can of buzzing bees sounds. You can take the bees out of the can if you want as well. You can get very famous tones out of this amp, and they're very distinct as well, the dual rectifier tones. I find I love this amp and I hate this amp all the time. It's one of those things, it's I'm either I don't want to have anything to do with it, or that's all I want. And I find it's also one of those amps, believe it or not, that I will keep in the corner. I keep it actually in my cabinet room, and it's on top of my Mesa cabinet. And if I'm recording, if something's not working, I will go into that room, I'll bring this amp out, and my God, it just fits with what I'm looking for in a high gain scenario. At number 19, we have the Mesa Boogie F100. This is an amp that I picked up on a whim because back when I used to shop at Long & McQuaid, I saw it. And I was like, I've never heard of an F100 because I've never researched one, I guess. And when I basically did a quick search on YouTube, and I couldn't really find too many videos out there that had it. And I bought it just on a whim. I was like, you know what, I've got to get it. I have to hear what it sounds like properly with my guitar, my cabinets, my setups, and everything. So I bought it and brought it home, and I am so happy that I did so. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is usually for down-tuned guitars, especially in a lower, deeper, I don't play doom, but a doom type of sound. Slow heavy metal here. This is my favorite Mesa for that type of a sound. It's just, it has that brr to it. it does have a built-in reverb, which makes me very, very happy. And I haven't made a metal video on it or a no pedals video on it. I don't even think I've done too much in the line of high gain amp shootouts, so that's definitely one that's on my list, because a lot of people, because you can pick this up at a good price on the used market, obviously you can't buy it new anymore, but a lot of people have asked me about it, and I've recommended it to a lot of people, but when I recommend it to a lot of people, I haven't really done a lot of videos on it, and that's definitely something that I have on my list for the near future. Number 20 is the Mesa Boogie Mark IIB. Now, a lot of people will go, oh, you have a Mark IIC Plus? No, this is the, I don't know if it's called the Bravo, but it's not a high gain monster like the 2C Plus is. You'll notice that it just says Mesa Engineering here. It does not have the 5-band EQ. This also is lacking of a reverb. However, if you compare this to like a Bassman or an older Marshall, this is awesome. That's kind of where this amp really shines. So it's not really a high, you can get in the high gain territory for sure, but it's not a high gain monster like most of the Mark series is. And again, it's missing a reverb. And these amps all the way up to like the Mark IV as well, some of the control, or Mark V as well, there's a lot of controls in the rear. There's a ton of them. But this has a presence control in the rear, which I think really would have been a benefit to pop it here, maybe make that Mesa logo a little smaller, just because it's one of those things where you kind of forget that it's on the amp. Number 21 is the Mesa Boogie Mark IV. Now this is the Rev B version, rather than the Rev A version. Rev A obviously was a little earlier. What does that mean? It means if you own a Rev A, you're going to tell everybody that it's the exact same thing as a Mark IIC Plus, even though not exactly. But if you own a Rev B and you're not me, you're going to say the exact same thing. I don't understand people. It's the same with JCM 800s. Ah, well, yours is different, mine's better. I don't get it. This is, between this and my VHT Pittbull, this is my favorite high gain amp. I favor this over a Mark V, which you'll see next. I don't know what it is. It's just the way that the controls are set up. Because you have your gain, and then you have your drive, and just, it's not hard to move the knobs as well, like it is on the Mark V. The Mark V, you're like, oh geez, I don't want to overturn it here, because you barely get to turn it, and then it turns all like it, you know what I mean. I'll talk about it, I guess. But the controls here with the gain and the drive, I find just gives it a little more boost, a little more edge to the sound that you can get over a Mark V. But it doesn't have all the different 2C Plus, 4, and the like extreme switches that you would have in a Mark V. This also has awesome reverb built into it. Number 22 is the Mesa Boogie Mark V 90 watt head. So it's not the 25 or the 35 watt version. It's the full Big Daddy, I guess you would call it. This amp really kind of changed me when I got it. I was basically, at that point I had the dual rectifier, the 3-channel 100 watt head. I had a JVM 410H and the JCM 2000 DSL 50. And then I brought this sucker home, and my God, I used to call the dual rectifier the Jesus amp, believe it or not. And then this one came in, and I was like, it's not the Jesus amp anymore. This is the Jesus amp now. Very, very, very versatile. Like I said before, I prefer the Mark IV to it, but it's, I can't really discount the 5 at all, because if the Mark IV is here, the Mark V is here, like you know what I mean, as opposed to like here. It's very close. It has that Mark IV switch to it, but I can't understand that, because it's like, oh, I have a Mark IV now. No, because it doesn't have gain and drive. It's the control scheme is different in it. Funny story, when I bought this, I bought it and they're like, do you need anything else? And they were asking me if I needed cables or anything like that. And I said, I'll take the AVH 5150 350 watt head that you have there too. I guess that's a flex. I just find it funny because I've done that a few times. I have a problem. Number 23, we have the Mesa Boogie Nomad 55. This is a very weird amp. It's an awesome amp, and if you're looking to do like hardcore sounds, I always have a hard time saying different genres if I don't necessarily play them. But if you're looking to get like a hardcore type sound, this is the Mesa for you. It's got a weird mid-hump to it, which a lot of amps do, which is why usually those amps are a little more interesting than other amps. And it's always good to have an amp that doesn't have that mid-hump issue, and one that does. They blend quite well. But this amp here, a 3-channel with the switches that give you a few other options to the sounds, 55 watts. Again, it can do hardcore really well. It can do metal, no problem. It can do like clean and blues as well. This is another amp where I haven't done a whole bunch of videos on it, and I do need to get to the no metal, no pedal videos with it. But I love it, and I'm very happy that I own it. Number 24, we have the Mesa Boogie Road King 1. This is a dual rectifier. Basically, I think it's the 3-channel 100 watt version that I have. But it also has EL34s in the back, so it has 2 EL34s, so you can actually make it more than a 100 watt amp. This has, as you would say, all the bells and whistles, and in the rear, just the back of this amp can be quite confusing to start with, because that's really where you start to set up your changes for each channel and stuff like that, so you can select which tubes you want to use and everything. But as far as tones that you can get, this is far and above what a dual rectifier can do, of course, because of the different amp or the different tubes that you can put in the signal, and it's a heavy one. And the board that you get for it, like the foot switch, is like this wide. It's huge. Number 25, we have the Orange OR15. I think I've used this in just one video, and it was like a guitar versus guitar shootout that I was doing, or a comparison that I was doing. This, as with a lot of the lunchbox heads, even though this is a proper, it's not a proper chassis or a proper thing, they're very surprising. This amp is, when I plugged into it the first time, because I got it in a trade for a 7-string, I plugged into it and I was like, this is going to sound a little limited. Which it does to some extent. It's limited in its limitability. But pop a reverb pedal in here and it's going to be a good day for you if you're messing around with it. It can definitely get into metal territory. Not specific metal, I guess you would say. It's the best way I can explain it. But it will definitely surprise you, and you'll be going, this is a good buy. Number 26, we have the Orange Rockerverb 100 Mark III. So this one has the attenuator built into it. This is a staple amp, I guess you would say, for me. This I hold up there with the, like when you're talking about like classic amps, you would say like the JCM 800, the JVM 410H, dual rectifier, a Mark V, those type of 6505 plus, those things. This I hold into it, or I hold along with those amps. So if I'm doing a comparison or whatever on guitars, I usually reach for this amp to be in one of those videos because it's one of those amps that it's a classic amp. The controls here, they're not kind of free-flowing, they're kind of stepped. So As you move it, you feel tiny little clicks. So that's, I find, one of the only downfalls to this amp, because sometimes when you're increasing the volume and increasing the gain, it gets a little too much at sometimes, and you may have to go change where your mic is positioned or what have you. Whereas if it was kind of free-flowing, you might be able to nail things a little easier. But it's a very slight downfall, as this amp here, if you use this amp, if you're looking to get a metal tone out of a Fender Strat, use this amp. Number 27, we have the undercover boss company, the Peavey 6505 Plus. This is the, after the 5150 series kind of left with Eddie Van Halen, going to Fender, forming EVH. They changed it to the 6505 Plus. I believe it's the 2005 was the 60. I don't know. It had something to do with an anniversary. Look it up. Okay, this amp here is awesome for a whole bunch of reasons. It's, again, missing a reverb. A spring reverb really would have made this amp come alive a little more than it does. It has that specific tone as well. So the amount of gain that's in here is nuts. And it's a bit of a darker amp. A dark, damp amp, I guess you would say. And it really shines for a lot of different metal tones, down-tuned or drop-tuned guitars. This is a good one for you. Number 28, we have the Peavey JSX Joe Satriani signature, which I think now is like the XXX2 or something like that. Or they probably don't even make it anymore. This, I went to see Joe Satriani live when he was being endorsed by Peavey, while they were paying him money, and he had just a stack of these. He had like 3 or 4 of them stacked, and like a couple of rows of them. And it was a sight to be seen. And this plate that's on front of here looks awesome. And kind of find out, Joe Satriani was using the clean channel with a DS1. So he didn't really use this amp for what people claim. So that's one of the reasons that I didn't really go out of my way to buy one for the longest time. And when I was looking to buy one, it was hard to get. Like, people were selling them for way too much. And what eventually happened was, and I think this has to do with the cheap potentiometers that Peavey always uses, make sure if you're buying a Peavey amp that you have some contact cleaner, because you're going to be pulling that chassis out and cleaning those potentiometers. But nowadays, I see these, and I'm Canadian, so I see these pop up for like $400, $450, $500. I bought this at Stan Guitars in Edmonton for $700, and I had to bring it home and clean the potentiometers that are in it. It's a good amp. I mean, it's the 3 channels that are on here are based off of different amps, which is very nice. One of them is the Peavey Classic 50, which I used to own a 4x10 of that, and I love that amp. So it's not a bad amp at all. It's a very good amp, and I think I need to do a couple of videos on it to kind of convince myself a little more of that. Number 29 is the Valve King 100. This is, I think, the Mark I version, although there could have been a different faceplate design on earlier Valve King 100s. This is an underestimated amp, I have to say. You can get some very good metal tones out of it, boosted or unboosted. You just have to be very careful with the bass control on the lead channel, because it can sort of come across in a recording like it's being brick-walled because of the low end. So basically, my rule of thumb with this amp is if you're recording it and it sounds really good, back the low end off a little bit, and you won't have that weird, like, I gotta record that all over again, because the low end is seemingly brick walling things. Number 30 is the Peavey Windsor. You can tell me schematic-wise, you can show me schematics, even though the schematics aren't the same, that this is a direct JCM 800 clone, but it's not. I've been told that by so many people, like, oh, you got a Peavey Windsor, eh? That's a cheap, I live in Canada, some people talk like this. That's a cheap, JCM 800 clone there, eh? It's exactly like it. I can make fun of my own country. It's not. It's got some different controls than the JCM 800, and it's got more gain on tap than the JCM 800. It's definitely its own thing. I can definitely see that it's modeled after with some, what Peavey would call improvements, but it's definitely got its own thing. And this is another amp where you keep it in the corner, and you know what, you're playing your Mesas, your Marshalls in a high gain setting, and you're like, something's not working for me. You go and get a Peavey Windsor, you bring it in, and it works. Or you go back to that sound and you go, there it is, and the sounds that you were playing all along work for you. Number 31 is a Peavey XXX. This is the one with the ladies on the faceplate. They changed it to like some weird like pinstripey logo after, I believe, and there was a version before where it looked like just an old Peavey amp. 3-channel amp, which I find the Ultra channel sounds awesome, but the Crunch channel sounds very tight, and you can get a lot of awesome tones out of it as well. I think I prefer the Ultra channel, but the Crunch channel is one of those secrets, I guess you would say. And of course, as everybody has known for years with these type of amps, when it's stacked, generally, the volume does act as a presence control. You and Kyle Bull are not the only ones who know this. It's been around for years. This, in direct comparison to like a 6505 Plus, which I've done the comparison, it sounds more like Peavey's version of a dual rectifier, even though the dual rectifier and the 6505 Plus were kind of modeled after Soldados. But it's an awesome amp. Does not need a boost. Works well with the boost, but also, like a lot of the Peavey amps, kind of the low end sort of suffers, in which you can kind of sort of brick wall your recording if you're not careful. Number 32 is the Traynor Custom Special 100. This is the H2 version, so this is the second iteration. I owned the first iteration, and it was like a silver-faced panel. I think it was a little taller, I could be wrong. But it had like some scorch marks on it. And like I bought it used at that point. And when I bought it, I can't remember what store I bought it from, but they were like, just so you know, these amps here have an issue where they can catch on fire. So I think that's just, it was addressed with the H2 version. And you know what? Like, there were a few years ago, I could look around and I could find like 2 or 3, not articles, but discussions on like, oh yeah, they had this issue and what have you. I don't know what it was. Obviously something to do with the tubes. But I can't really find much on it. And I think what I can find on it is like a comment that I made years and years back. But doesn't have the fire issue. This is a sticker that says Made in Canada here, which is annoying, and I should take it off. But this is a very, very good amp. A lot of people do refer to this as the Canadian dual rectifier, which I don't think at all it deserves that title. It's a good amp. It's a very, very good amp. And It does have built-in reverb, which is nice, and it's a very versatile amp. But I find when you're trying to get a metal type tone, which a lot of the stuff that I do is geared towards metal. The rest of the stuff not so much, but like it has a boost switch, it has a modern and a scoop switch. I do not use any of these switches. When you start bringing those switches in, the gain sort of falls apart. It also suffers from a little bit of, it's either a weak low end, it's either got like a little bit of low end or way too much low end. There's not the best in between. There's not like the best perfect setting for the low end, I have found. And I'm sorry if you really like this amp and this is your main amp. I love this amp too. I own it and I still own it. I paid money for it and I don't regret it. But yeah, that's just what I find with it. A lot of people call it the Canadian dual rectifier. I don't think so. Number 33, and the last amp in my collection other than the two amps that I'll show you. The VHT Pittbull Ultra Lead. This is usually a little above my Mesa Boogie Mark IV as my favorite amp for metal. Or just high gain. It does so much. It's got a 6-band EQ as opposed to the 5 bands that are found on the Marshalls. And it's just got that low end and very sweet mids to it. It can make any amp or any guitar sound metal. Metal AF, as the kiddies say. Some things that I've heard since I've bought it, and I've been told this from like previous owners who can't find new ones, basically. I think there was one person who like just owned it and didn't want to have it anymore. It's hard to mix in a band scenario, which I haven't really found as much. I mean, it's not going to cut through and stand out as much as a JCM 800. But it's still going to perform very, 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 very well. But I can understand and appreciate if someone says, like what I find with a Martin D35, it's more enjoyable to the player as opposed to the listener. Like, you know, Martin D35 compared to like a D28 or so. But yes, I find that this is my amp. I love it. It just performs really, really well. I constantly do have it on the lead channel in high gain mode rather than on the rhythm channel in high gain mode. The rhythm channel is one that is downplayed quite often. The rhythm channel, a lot of people always describe it as a JCM 800, but maybe that's a comparison. I can do it at a later day. But I just love this amp. VHT, you might see it now as they're listed as Fryette. Basically, someone else wanted to use the VHT name, so they paid them to buy the name from them, and they just changed the name to Fryette. Because I think the dude's name is something Fryette. And I can't give these amps here a number now because this is the EVH 5153 50 watt head. And I can't remember if I sold or traded it to Kevin on this channel, but I just haven't sent it to him yet. He's not in a desperate need to get it, even though this happened like 3 years ago or something really stupid. But there's just, when I get ready to send it out to him, I'm like, I just bought this amp, I should do a shootout between it. And that's just kind of how it's been going. He knows it's coming to him, it's just, when you have so many amps, it's just a benefit to do shootouts to kind of rid curiosity. But this is an amp that I've always said it's sort of like a one-trick pony, but it does that trick extremely, extremely, extremely well. It is more versatile than I've always thought, though, because I did a no metal, no pedal video on it, and you can get some breakup tones to it. You know, if you dial the gain back, basically where it is now, which is almost off on channel 3, that's when you're going to get your breakup tones. Channel 2, you can kind of get that as well. This is a 6L6 version. This is the like initial version of the 5153s, 50 watts, because now there's like an EL34 or a C, like now it's a very confusing lineup. But yeah, this is obviously EVH is a Fender-made company, so I'm always told that this is the worst Peavey that they ever made, which I don't understand. But it's definitely a great amp. It has a resonance control built into it, which the 100 watt version did not have until the Stealth. So I really wanted to get the 100 watt version, but that's kind of the reason I haven't done it, because the resonance control is very, very important to the 5150 series. And the last amp in this video, again, Kevin's amp. This is the Paul Reed Smith MT15, so the 15 watt Mark Tremonti head, which Kevin is a very big fan. I wouldn't say obsessed with Mark Tremonti, maybe he is, but he's a huge fan of Mark Tremonti, whereas I really only know him from a couple of Creed songs. This is a good amp, but a 50 watt or a 100 watt version would make me a lot happier. When you're getting it up to levels that would shake the walls, which is generally where I play, because I find that's just where you get the best sounds. The amp sounds a lot more, or a lot fuller, and my smile goes from to. So, yeah. There's mods that you can get for this, but it involves like changing out the transformer, and myself or Kevin, I don't think we want to get electrocuted, and that's something where we're not experienced enough where we would get electrocuted. But it's another amp that people say it's patterned after a dual rectifier. I can kind of see that a little different though. But I do find it very lacking. I was very surprised when I did the no metal, no pedal video on it, because it was a little more versatile than I thought in the beginning. But I don't know, just for myself, I think the 15 watts limits it too much. Alright, so there we go. There is my tube amp collection for May 2022. A whole 33 tube amp heads and 2 amp heads that are not mine. Again, this is not any type of bragging. I'm not that kind of a guy. I used to be. There was a part of me that was an elitist. I owned 8 core line Paul Reed Smiths, and 7 out of the 8 were 10 tops. And, you know, I wouldn't want to play this or that. There was a period where I didn't like Gibson or Fender. That's kind of all I have now. And I've moved away from the Paul Reed Smiths. In all honesty, whether it's a $100 guitar or a $100 amp, it's all the way up to like a $50,000 or $60,000 guitar or whatever amp, as long as you're enjoying what you're playing, that's all that really matters. I mean, I'm a musician because when I was 12, I picked it up and I loved it. I fell in love with playing guitar, and I've continued that love. I'm definitely not a guitar player or what have you to be a YouTuber. It's just not. It's fun making videos, but I don't consider myself a YouTuber by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, I'm definitely not bragging here, and I don't know what's wrong with people when they think that. I don't understand the jealousy or what have you. But anyway, like I said, I play all these amps. Some of them I definitely keep in corners. Like there's some amps where to be very, very honest, there's some amps where if I'm recording, I'm using a set amount of amps or what have you, particular amps for that recording. If something's not jiving for like a solo or whatever, there's certain amps that I keep in corners that I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to try this instead, and I bring it in. And I start playing through that. And it either works, or what I find usually is that it doesn't work for the sound. And then when I switch back to the amp that I was using before, magically the sound's working for me. Or I'm like, you know what? I need to pull down the treble or increase the mids or something like that. And it kind of helps out. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. If you want, you can request different shootouts from this video. It's totally fine with me. I think that was the whole point of making the video. Anyway, thanks for watching.